On this episode of the Ninja Tune podcast, we listen back to Rough Trade Shop's Zoom Q&A with Matt and Andy from Bicep, who were joined by special guest host Joe Muggs for an intimate conversation with an opportunity for audience questions. This live-streamed Q&A event celebrates the release of Isles, the new album from Bicep that is out now. 2 years in the making, Isles expands on the artful energy of their 2017 debut, Bicep.
Hey, how you doing?
Right. Massive round of applause wherever you are for Bicep. Nice to see them here.
A round of applause for Joe as well.
In your beautiful magenta studio.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you know, first question that is impossible to answer anyway in these, as they constantly say, unprecedented times. How are you?
On a medium day. There's good days, bad days, medium days. Now we're good. We're pretty good.
It's like it's the final stretch, the release, and we're just really happy to kind of actually have it out there. So it's been all kind of work for the last couple of months behind the scenes to try and get it ready. It's been actually quite a lot of work. We thought it was going to be a bit more chilled out, but
it wasn't a year off at all last year. I mean, in many ways, we're blessed that we're so busy because obviously it's a tricky time for a lot of people, especially in music. So I think this has come for us at a good time. And the streams were a lot of work last year, which kept us very busy.
It's been an interesting thing that I've found for a lot of musicians. This kind of tension between, obviously the fear and uncertainty, but also the chance to kind of stop and take stock that happened during the last year. Which must have been interesting because this is like a pivotal time for you. You must be kind of aware of this is like a milestone, a step up in your career.
Yeah, it's weird because we took a lot of 2019 off. We finished the last live tour in January, and we took most of 2019 off to write the album, and so we'd really finished the writing phase, and we're just about to start tour in March, and then we were off again for another year. But then in many respects, again, we were strangely. The streams and rethinking everything for that took up quite a lot of time, and having to rewrite the live show each time we did a new stream because we've got another one coming up in February that we've been working on. So it's been strangely quite full on and busy.
I remember speaking to you probably five or 6 years ago now, and being struck by how disciplined you were about your work processes. Like I think you said you basically toured 10 months a year and took 2 months to just like have studio time. I mean, have you always been fairly structured and planned ahead in things?
Yeah, I think we've always been quite structured. We always take January off to kind of work in the studio. So when we're touring, we always have that time in there to kind of catch up and do edits, just be creative again, not be restricted to any kind of like deadlines or anything. But at the same time, as every single day, we kind of try and come down to the studio, even if we're just working on like testing out a new synth or just like working on artwork, doing emails. It's just we're always quite structured to kind of get down to the studio and do a little bit of work.
I think because there's two of us, it's a lot harder to be sort of fluid. I think the structure really makes it a lot easier for both of us to have normal lives outside of music, because if we kind of decided one of us wants to come in late, one of us wants to come in early to the studio, or take a week off here, it can just weeks can turn into months, can turn into years. So we just try and keep a bit of a structure. going. I mean, it's
good. It means that we can actually focus when we're in the studio. We're like full 100%. We're full work mode, and then once we switch off at like 5 o'clock, we'll go home and we can not answer emails and not think about music so much. And then the next day it's a new day and
start fresh.
It means that we're always fresh ideas every day. If we're working on music or we're in album cycle, we're constantly, when we go home, we think about just little ideas rather than being in the studio and really working on stuff.
So given all that, did you because you'd set aside time and you were like, right, it's album time now, was there a kind of any grand concept about what it was going to be, where it fit, what it meant, what it represented about you?
We've worked that out better once we'd finished, but we set a couple of for us, because we had been on tour for 2 years, it was really important to have a period of experimentation again, like we needed to go in and use the studio as musicians, not writing an album, just come in and do it,
And also kind of informed from being on live tour for 2 years, like picking up the little tricks and stuff we did on the live tour and trying to implement that in the music or experiment in ways that we could implement it into the music.
But I think we had some framework from the very beginning that we wanted to kind of stick to, and that was, we kind of felt with the first album we'd sat, it wasn't a club album, but it wasn't a home listening album. It was a bit caught in the middle. I think stuff like Aura was mixed for club, but then we had tracks like Air that were kind of mixed for home listening, and for us, we hadn't really played the strengths of either, and we're obviously very proud of the first album, but I think from like an artistic point of view, it made it harder for some tracks to develop into dance floor tunes or think about a live show, because we'd not really considered the live tour as well. So with this album, one of the early parts of the writing process was to really make sure, firstly, every track that we were going to finish was something that we could perform both as a live track, and with that idea, we also wanted to make sure it was something we could make a home listening track. So we wanted to almost approach it with this idea that each song would have 2 versions, or at least be developed over the course of a year, from the album version into the live show version, and that could be completely different drums or changing the energy of the track, but we wanted to really have this more fluid approach to the music. And with that, once we kind of decided that was our goal, it gave us a lot more freedom to maybe explore the album with not having to try and cover the club aspect with the home listening version. Do you know what I mean? And I think that from the beginning gave us a lot of freedom, and instantly kind of allowed us to experiment with like sonics and playing with reverbs a lot more, and thinking about the kind of overall mixes.
I think
totally differently.
With the live show, you got to definitely mix it for like a live audience in the club environment, and it's a very different mix to how you'd want to hear it in your headphones. If you want it loud, if you want it punchy, and they're not like things we took into consideration when we started writing the first album, but we found we struggled to kind of get all the tracks to balance with each other, and we spent a lot of time just learning how to mix, and because we were pretty much doing everything ourselves, and it's like a long learning process. And even during this album, even to the last day before we sent in the final mixes for mastering, we're learning little tricks to kind of get them to balance and sound better. And you can constantly tweak for hours and hours, but having at least some sort of restrictions and thinking about this doesn't have to be the final club version, it made it a lot easier to kind of finish off.
Did it make you stop and think about where you come from when you were kind of getting that balance between club and live show and home listening? Did you ever kind of get moments of vertigo of like, wow, we've come this far? Because like you guys are big.
Yeah, we kind of keep like I said, we keep the routine. We've still got our friends from home, and we're quite grounded in that sense that we just keep it like we've got like a small network, so we never really we never think of it in that respect.
I mean, when you think about the size of shows you do, you know, when you're suddenly facing dot number of tens of thousands of people, you know, do you get this kind of like, oh, okay, this is
we try not to look up from the
try to tweet out. That's why we're spacing each other and play live. No, I think, well, I mean, for sure it got to the stage where we definitely realized that it was going to be very hard to make music that would work at home and for those sort of shows. That was that and stuff that was going to artistically represent what we want to do in our heads with, and that was part of the problem. We almost had
to redesign the first album to work for the bigger crowds.
Yeah,
like there's even
like it wasn't enough.
Yeah, even the tunes that were caught in between halfway, like even Aura, which would say were one of the biggest tunes in the first album, we still had to even beef that up a little bit more for the live show. So that was informing the decisions that we did for the second album. But like Matt said earlier, it was like we didn't have that restriction in a sense that the album version was always going to be slightly different than the one we were going to play out or what that was envisioned for the club. So it gave us freedom, and it means that we can keep building on the idea for the bigger shows and make the tracks bigger if we need to.
I mean, what's it been like this last year? I mean, obviously you had the streams, and so you had, you know, nuts and bolts stuff to occupy your minds. But what's it been like having this album ready and the world change around it, and kind of thinking, you know, about the reception and what that might be?
There was a for sure a sense of free fall from March to the summer, where not only was music collapsing in a sense of immediately around us in terms of what we planned for that year, but also with the industry as well. And obviously then with the greater, obviously more importantly with COVID itself across the world, there was that sort of like sense of terror and dread that kind of did dominate the first, you know, half of the year. And then we got to the summer, and I think we kind of readjusted our expectations quite significantly to the point where we knew we wouldn't be doing anything till at least summer 2021. I think at that stage, when you kind of have fully accepted, right, this is actually huge, this has taken over everything that we've thought about for the last couple of years, there was obviously a sense of being able to reevaluate and move forward with kind of thinking about the streams and stuff. I mean, it's been very tough, but I think we've really wanted to use it, the time wisely, you know, like there's been very it's been tough, but it's been, I suppose at the same time, we always complained about not getting a chance to maybe refine stuff. That, like when we finished the first album, we were pretty much on tour straight away, and it was, you really were stitching together the live show on Tuesday mornings and then leaving on Wednesday, and it was constantly, you know, there was times that we were up on stage in soundcheck adjusting files and changing MIDI clips, and really it was very, like, it was good to work under that pressure, but it was definitely a sense of kind of really learning on the job. So I think this year's been kind of good. Last year, it was good to have a chance to really refine things a little more, test things out. We changed quite a lot of equipment in the live show, and we're able to take time and experiment a bit more.
And even with this, the streams have been like our creative outlet, really. So we've tried to like actually pour in as much as we can, because we know the restrictions and how the actual live streams and how they work. But we really wanted to recreate like what we do in a club to a certain degree. In terms of experience, and we just been exploring every single way possible with Zach, the guy who does the visuals, and just trying to incorporate that as much as we can and make it as live as possible. That's basically what we've focused all our creative energy into this year, and that's taken a lot, because without the crowd there and without reactions and without 2 years of being on the road to refine the live show, it's really hard to present it as an idea, especially this, if we're talking, the whole plan was to kind of have these different versions be more clubby, but the first time we present it essentially is a live stream to the whole world. So that's been like a lot of pressure in terms of trying to get it right, because we'd normally just phase in one track a month possibly and try and get them working, and then also refine them over the year. So yeah, it's been quite challenging in that respect. So we set ourselves like some hard challenges, and it's been quite good to overcome them, because I'm very happy with how the second live ones went and how it's going to progress in future.
How's it been hearing your music on the radio? Because, I mean, you know, I've got young kids, so we have Radio 1 on quite a lot, you know, doing the school runs, and just hearing Bicep, and, you know, it's not a pop tune, but like hearing Greg James and, you know, the Radio 1 daytime DJs waxing lyrical about it, no less, you know.
I mean, we're like massively humbled by that, and also, like for us, radio's been a kind of lifeline for us the past year, because apart from the streams, it's been one of the main ways that we've been able to actually access people, and obviously we haven't been really fully in control of that. So the fact that we've had a lot of support from Radio 1 and Radio 6 and all the other radio stations has been amazing. Like, I mean, it's been a godsend.
Even listening, I've got way more into just getting on Radio 6, just always in the background. And I feel like with COVID and a lot of people isolating, it serves as like another person to talk to or another voice in the room. Yeah. And even today I had on Radio 6 and Mariana Hobbs had it on when I was like cooking my breakfast, and it was just an eerie thing where the album's out this week and she puts on a tune and you just don't expect it, and I still get excited every time I hear it. And like my friends texting me and stuff, it's like it's a different thing than being in the club on stage performing. It's like but that's what you do the albums for, and that's the gratification we get from the process.
And I have to say kudos to like Ninja and our management as well for the process of the writing last year. We obviously come from a club background, and we didn't develop our kind of ears to think with radio really in mind. We came from 10 years of sort of DJing into writing an album, as opposed to from another direction. So they really did help in the A&R process, and when we were just discussing demos, you know, really they had an ear to say, you know, making us consider not radio so much, but certainly made us really think about the music with broader appeal. And that's something that we could never have known how reliant we would have been on radio coming into, you know, last year. But really, it's been, as I say, it's been like a lifeline to kind of to be able to stay, to be able to still feel you've kind of been able to get music continually out there when we haven't been in charge to do it ourselves.
It's even been pushing us to get the idea that we'd normally make over 8 minutes and chuck it into 3 minutes but still feel coherent. It's like that's really challenging.
Like that's been a hard thing to sort of learn, you know, to kind of condense. Well, I think it makes you think about your ideas more clearly, you know, like all our tracks began at, I think one of our first ever releases was called 313, and I think it clocks in at 11 minutes 36. It's something like that. Okay, so
nothing changes in the first. I put it on the other day, and like the first 3 minutes, nothing happens. I'm like, shit, we got away with that one. It's like there's being deep, and there's just being too deep.
Yeah.
Do you think the radio thing and streams are changing the sense of your relationship to the people that listen to your music and sense of community within dance music generally? I mean, sorry, I'm just scrolling through this. On the questions, Michelle here says, my 6-year-old son Jimmy loves you guys because of Radio 6 music has kind of got him obsessed. And I've just... You know, I've heard so many people talking like that about their families listening to music together. And, you know, my wife does Big Fish, Little Fish family raves, and they do a kitchen rave on a Sunday. And you finding these new kind of community things forming around live streams and radio and stuff that weren't there before.
Yeah, it's just like opened our eyes even more to that sort of thing. It's like you do realize there's a big family in Six Music that might not experience us normally in a club.
Yeah.
And even when we do mixes and put them up there, you get lots of tweets from people that we'd never seen. We've obviously got like a fan base that contact us all the time on Twitter, but these are new people. And it's the same even when we do live show, or we did the first live stream, people sharing videos, and it's something I never expected, to be honest. And it's kind of grown so naturally, I think.
I mean, I think there's definitely something rewarding about we would get messages sometimes from people, 50s, 60s. I think we've had a few people in their 70s send us messages, and it's just like I mean, my dad's got friends who've messaged him, and it's like, wow, this is pretty cool.
I like give my dad's friend some of our tracks, and he was playing them at the wedding, and all the kids were coming up to him like, how do you know these tunes? And I'd given him like white labels and stuff, and he was playing them at the wedding, and they're just like blowing their mind. It's like obviously like our parents are really proud and stuff, and they're always talking about it to all their friends, but then you start seeing their kids getting into it as well, coming to the gigs, and it goes like full circle.
We talk a bit about your early influences as kids. I mean, there's a couple of people in the questions. So Tim's asked who your early electronic music influences, and Mark, as a fellow Northern Irishman, is asking, about your early club influences. I know that from early on, you weren't just listening to the sort of club music of the time. You and your friends were always swapping like older tunes as well. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean,
it kind of represents like the blog. Like it would be anything goes. It'd be a good hip hop tune, it'd be a good rock tune. Like a lot of our friends are into like heavy metal and stuff. It could be a metal tune, or it could be like intense techno. It was never really a genre specific thing.
Yeah, it was more feeling, if you know what I mean. Like, and in the same way, like Italo disco, 80s music. Like everyone loved, like it's really funny. I had like vivid memories of being 17 and like 3 or 4 of my friends going nuts about like the reverb on an 80s snare. It's like things like that where like people would pick up on that, and like they're into 9 Inch Nails. I was into like a lot of metal, and I was used to BMX a lot, so like I was into metal and only going to electronic music quite late on. When I say late on, like 16 or 17 really. Before that I didn't really listen to any at all. So we quite. And my household was very musical. It's like always had, everything from like Enya and Mary Black playing all day to, kind of the Clannad. And
yeah, it was the same. Like my parents were just into like Rory Gallagher and like classic Irish rock, and like
a lot of Irish music,
Thin Lizzy and stuff. I think there's like a sense in Ireland there's so much support to their own acts that you hear all the time on the radio, and the radio's full up with them. So yeah, a lot of that sort of stuff. But then it was the classics as well. It was like Tool, Nirvana and things like that, like you'd listen to a bit of everything. I think we were just a bit like I'd listen to everything, and just good music would come through really.
Yeah,
I remember you telling me some time ago about I can't remember if it was one of your garages or one of your friends' garages.
Yeah, it's called the Garage.
Like tell us a bit about that, because that sounds like a kind of crucible for doing. We would go out to Shine, which was a big techno club in Belfast when we were about 16, 17. We all started kind of going 16, 17 for a couple of years before we went to university. And before we would go out to Shine, we would do a 3 hours meetup at this garage. And this is, again, no Spotify, no streaming. YouTube had no music on it. YouTube was nothing at that stage. Certainly you might have had funny camera phone cat videos.
Dave Chappelle, that was it.
yeah, it was like cat videos of Dave Chappelle. So music was still very much like the blog culture was sort of bubbling away, and it was kind of still a lot of radio
internet wasn't fast
printing
enough to make it.
Yeah, we would just everyone would arrive with their own CDs. and we people be arguing to get their selection of whatever tracks they'd burnt to a CD that week. And it was definitely we're very lucky to have a group of mates with very eclectic tastes, and it would always be this sort of competitive culture of like selections and finding out who'd find this and I got this. And that was just about the period when we started to get into electronic music. We kind of Aphex Twin, Lauren Garnier, stuff like that, Dave Clark, and that was when we were kind of also we would get into a bit of disco and Italo and stuff. And also then at Shine was a lot of hard techno, but we were kind of, the whole idea of the garage before was more like not club music. It was more sort of oddball left field stuff. And that was really the inspiration for our blog. We both left Belfast at 18 to go to university. And it was at that stage that we kind of wanted to continue that feeling of sort of sharing between each other, and that the blog really came out of wanting to maintain that idea of having some sort of collection, or an idea of putting, creating your own playlists and having somewhere to put music you find and kind of chronicle it.
Yeah, I think that sharing's a massive important part of what we do. I like the feeling of letting people hear it, and then like kind of encouraging them to seek out that music for themselves, or delve in deeper to it. And it's honestly, it hasn't even changed. It's like our friends who go to the garage, or who went to the garage, we're still in contact with them pretty much daily. Yeah. And if I find an album, I'll send it to them, and if they don't reply back to me, I'll be a wee bit like it stings a bit still.
Yeah.
It's like I still want that approval. Yeah. It's like, and that matters more, but it still happens. It's like we still have arguments about stuff. And
we the same crew on New Year's Eve this year. Obviously, none of us could meet up. We were all in separate houses. We all bought tickets to the Optimo New Year's Eve stream, and everybody was in a WhatsApp group critiquing the tunes for every mix the whole way through, all getting hammered, just going, oh my god, look at this, and like, whoa. So it's like we definitely were very blessed to have like a really good group of mates who are very nerdy, deeply into their music,
Optimo straight away, brings us to your college days, and another city with a particularly tight and nerdy, but not in a nerdy way, music community. It's hedonism and nerdiness kind of mesh. Those sort of places. I mean, I often think there's something about cities smaller than London, at least, whether it's Manchester, Glasgow, Belfast, Bristol, whatever, that kind of encourage that, because people are a little bit more in each other's pockets, and you actually run into people in the street or in the record shop or whatever. What was Glasgow like?
Well, I went to university in Manchester, and Matt went to Newcastle.
But we were up at Optimo a lot.
Yeah, I would say the common ground was, as much as Manchester had, it didn't have Optimo on Sundays, and it was definitely a common ground with all our friends from all over university. It gave us an excuse, especially the special Optimo parties.
A lot of our friends went to Glasgow Uni as well. We had a big base there.
Hammer went there.
The main three cities was Manchester, Newcastle, and Glasgow, and Newcastle was pretty redundant at the time, music-wise. It was just, I mean, it was a lot more studenty and less sort of music nerdy. So really, a lot of our weekends were spent either in Manchester, down at the original Sankey's, or up in Optimo in Glasgow.
And even within Manchester, as big as it was at the time, there was no warehouse project. Sankey's was...
It was like a more minimal techno, whereas like Glasgow was definitely that sort of... I mean, Optimo was where you were schooled when you went to Optimo, you know, hearing all these styles blended together, and hearing, you know, kind of Dolly Parton mixed to hard techno, like actually they would mix in, you know, was just like, wow, this is like really opened your eyes to the possibilities.
I'm just scrolling through the questions here. I played some of your guys' stuff to my uncle at Christmas. He's from the Chemical Brothers.
Amazing.
And likened some of your this is related to something I was going to get onto with this, and likens your pioneering style to theirs in the 90s, because, you know, as you were kind of starting the blog and sharing stuff, you would share disco, but also things like prog house, which were like not considered cool at the time. You know, you were picking and choosing from all over the place. But, you know, classic 90s euphoria always seems to have had a place in your sound. And on this album more than ever, you know, it's like, for me, it's like Future Sound of London is kind of swooping through it. And there's a bit of Orbital, and there's a bit of, you know, quite a few of the acts that I grew up on. You know, is there a specific part of your brains or your creative process that thinks in a 90s way?
I think it was such a fruitful time, and even some of my first memories were recording The Prodigy off the radio on the cassette tape. And even those certain sounds, rave sound stabs like jungle breaks, like the quintessential dark, like growing up. And even when we discovered techno, it was very much that old school, like sampley, but like the synthesizers and the drum machines never really changed. Yeah. So like there's 808, 909, and, you know, like Juno sounds have always been like core to what we liked and what we grew up with. And it's kind of, we've progressed definitely in the studio and experimented with other stuff, but like there is definitely that backbone of stuff that got us in it in the first place, which we still love.
I think like, I mean, we've been trying to work out, like, because they're obviously, we know, like, having to like evaluate or look at the music we write, we sometimes, because it's instrumental and there's two of us in the studio, we don't sit down and say, like, we never sit down and say, let's make something in a particular style. We jam for hours, and usually it just develops quietly over 8 or 9 hours and over weeks and months, and there's not really a huge amount of sort of we don't like use like reference tracks. So we actually kind of think of like, remember that track, we don't even know the name of it, but like the idea for a track or a vibe is more important in terms of like the motion of it rather than the. But I think it's hard to know if like the licensing laws. I mean, this feels like a bit of a tangent, but I think it's more of the Irish side of us, that like euphoria side, than that. And what we've kind of worked out is that in Northern Ireland, the licensing laws, everywhere shuts at 3 a.m. So you've basically got between 11 p.m. and 3 a.m. to get a full club night in. So we had always this thing that anytime as we got older, people came back to DJ, our friends would DJ, we'd host nights there, and they'd be like, oh, I'm on from like 11 to 12, like what should I play? And I'm like, mate, there's no such thing as a warm-up in Northern Ireland. You go in and that's it. Like, second tune, you get one track at the start of your set to warm up, then you're in. And I think maybe it's that sense of urgency and immediacy, and also like that like energy that like you have this small space of time to kind of go in, that sort of just stuck with us. You know, our earliest clubbing memories were very full on, and it's hard to say. It's like,
I mean, definitely say when we're making music and when we perform it live, it's definitely about harnessing energy and not wasting. We build up stuff and harness it in the right way, and it's definitely just what we've learned over time, especially making music and when you're creating stories, but also thinking about structure in terms of tracks. It's not just about like one drop, it's about like, is this drop going to be bigger, or how can I make the second drop bigger, but without making it sound like a drop? It's all these little things of just like harnessing balls of energy and moving it around. And I think a lot of early dance tracks had lots of like optimism and like just like lots of energy. You could feel it in like people's productions. It was like fresh, it was new, anything goes. It was like the weirdest noises, let's chuck that in there. And sometimes you just need to get back to that, and I would definitely try and keep that naive approach to when we start making demos, because it needs to be fun essentially.
And you make a lot. I mean, you're saying you kind of jam things out. I mean, Richard on the chat was asking how many tracks do you make and then filter out for an album like this? And I think I read it was a lot.
Yeah, it was about 150 for this one. But
that was the final folder. But then
there'd be six or seven versions of some tracks, and some are a 15-second demo, like a 15-second clip. Others are just a drum beat with a cool reverb. It's like 150 demos is sort of the biggest thing, but
also I'd say we didn't record in full, like lots of tracks. It's like sometimes we'll jam for ages just to work out a drum machine, but then at the same time we won't record it. So like sometimes we know a demo's not worth even recording, but 150 was like the base level for this one going into this one.
How did you start? I mean, what came first, the DJing or the production?
DJing. Production came as a necessary element of DJing. Like, we didn't study music at school, and it's really happened very gradually. Like, we began with the blog. It became one of those things that we had a lot of Italo disco that we were listening to, and like anybody who collects Italo knows that like often you buy a record and there's 20 seconds of amazingness followed by 2 minutes of the worst folk you've ever heard, and then there's best drums you've ever heard followed by another 2 minutes of the worst. And it was just through that, and obviously that period of about 2005 2006 where the whole disco edit culture was kind of quite big in the bloghouse stuff. So we just started doing simple disco edits, and we kind of got an ear for a lot of the stuff we were cutting up and editing was these amazing old 80s synths and this quite cheap lo-fi production. And then we got into using Ableton a bit. And then when you start using Ableton, especially back then, the soft synths and their drum machines, they're awful as shit. And, you know, the reverbs are tinny, and you're like, whoa, these old soundtracks sound way better. And at that stage, we didn't really know why the stuff we were cutting up sounded so much better. So that slowly got to the stage where we were making like house music and trying to use quite a lot of samples, but still make the arrangements a bit more unique. But then eventually you kind of just get wrapped in more and more. You're like, I want to have that synth. I want a 909. And then when you get one, it just becomes a wormhole where it becomes addictive. Then you start learning piano. And then, you know, it's very gradual. Like, I don't think we were ever really particularly, 2015 felt like the first time that we were starting to kind of get on top of it. And we'd been releasing for like four years by that stage.
Yeah, I think with production as well, it's like we kind of dedicate pretty much all our life to like coming in the studio and working that way, or like working life. So it's, for me and Matt, not to kind of know any kind of piano or dedicated to like actually producing. It's like we need to be sat in the studio and work together. And when we both can understand piano, so when we produce now, it's quite easy to kind of write, in the sense that if you were just writing normally, it's very easy to kind of pick a key and just jam for hours rather than just doing random stuff, which we were doing probably previously, or moving the blocks around the screen hoping for like some gold. And when you don't know what you're doing, it becomes frustrating, and it's like it's not as fun. Whereas when you understand it a bit, you can deconstruct it. Then it's like being able to paint and then just be able to kind of be abstract afterwards.
Early releases and on the, you know, when you started the label, I mean, it really felt like you were you know, not in a pejorative way, but you were another underground act with very much a dance label, and you were putting out fairly tooly sort of tracks. You know, they were deep house, funky, whatever. You know, it was clear that they were tracks for DJs. I don't think there was any sense from that early stuff that, you know, this anthemic huge show's Bicep was far down the road. Was there any sense for you that it was?
Well, I think at the time it was definitely like a born out of the blog and the kind of do everything for yourself culture. Like we kind of both me and Matt had like full-time jobs in design, and when you're working for someone else and your ideas are going into some other input and maybe not formulated in the same way, like they get distorted and changed a lot. The like blog became a place where we can just do whatever we wanted, and from that we were like, we can actually produce our own records here, we can do the artwork, we can do this.
But we were learning in public. Like I think most people would have held off 2015 before they released. I think we got stuff out quite not prematurely. I think it was a good thing because it really it gave us a want to do better. Do you know what I mean? And I think also we couldn't like the really, when we were doing a lot of that like 90s house stuff, we just didn't have any money to afford any synths, and that was the closest we could get to a sound that we liked, which was probably more analog leaning, like a bit more lo-fi. Anything we made on a computer, we just didn't really like how it sounded. And then eventually when we were able to start getting synths, it gave us a lot more freedom. Like I remember when we first got a Juno, we were like, oh my God, we can now play chords, we can do arps, and then we got an SH101 and it was like, we can do bass. Like I remember we were like, we need something for bass. And when we got something, it was like, that was the beginning of like, okay, we actually have freedom now, you know?
And also even turn on the 909 for the first time and you realize the hats don't even line up. And that's what gives it this kind of class, like jangle, like rattle. And you know, when you're sitting on a computer moving blocks around trying to recreate that rattle from listening to old records, it's just not the same. And it also takes hours and hours, whereas you just turn that on, boom.
During this kind of period of growing and you know, finding your feet and finding your sound, I mean, you say that people go full on in Belfast, and you can say the same of Glasgow as well, because similar licensing laws and similar intensity. But actually, that can mean quite deep house music. It can, you know, quite deep and funky. It doesn't mean like bang bang noisy.
Deep house was music for like a bar in Belfast. You couldn't like it was hard techno, like Dave Clark. Like going to see Christian Smith seemed like a soft night, and anything like any sort of electro nights were seen as like a night that was soft. Like it was very and deep house was bar. Like there was in Shine there was like 4 rooms. But anything that was housey was seen as the bar, like only house acts, like Fish Go Deep and all the kind of, you know, Terence Parker and stuff were always in the bar, and it was just ripping hard techno in the main room.
All right, okay.
I think it's definitely our experience of growing up there, and also the time.
Things have changed since, you know.
The different clubs, like there obviously is deep scenes, and like a lot of the guys who are playing this house music, like the likes of Timmy Stewart and John MacGyver, these guys that we grew up with as well, these guys were digging super deep, knew every old Detroit record, and you know, there is deep scenes within that, but what I would say is the predominant mood, and everyone was in these main rooms and chanting or like dancing along to like Green Velvet La La Land is a very different thing, which I wouldn't particularly call deep.
Yeah. For us, the flip side was really moving to London then. Like we got the complete education like from a totally different spectrum, which is when we came to London, and obviously like Jungle, going to see Theo Parrish and stuff, getting all the deep house nights there was really a completely different experience. Going to a club for 12 hours, going to see Villa Lobos or Fabric, those much longer afternoons where things were built up slowly.
Yeah, you can play 12 minutes of the same track, and only a hat needs to come in and out, and it's it's not the same.
I mean, is there a reason that you didn't go banging early?
I think that's when we got into Italo disco. I think you flip flop at that age. You kind of we were like blessed with all these techno acts, and we'd do that every weekend, and we were pretty much obsessed with it for like 3 years. And then the techno scene started actually. It
went minimal by the time we got started producing. It was the end of the whole minimal techno thing, and that was just we made it
like electroclash then.
Yeah, electroclash and minimal.
Yeah, and it wasn't really.
The energy was gone for us.
Yeah, it felt slow, and it felt like you know, like the sounds weren't there. So I'd even say the old techno was like that sampley stuff, but it was a bit softer, a bit more like real drums sampled. And then that's when we fell in love with the Italo disco, which was the kind of the real polar opposite to hard techno. Yeah. It's strange. I remember talking about it at the time, and then it's like, why do you like both these things? And we kind of see them very similar.
Yeah.
So that kind of set your tempo. And when did you start playing? You know, actually touring, like going further afield and even playing abroad?
I got Rory Hamlet sent me a message there yesterday. I think it was like 12 years to the day that we went to China for the first time, and it was like as bloggers going out to China to DJ, and I think that was our first kind of we can actually tour on a blog. But yeah, I think it took a real long time. We had a couple of residencies in Barcelona, and I think we had gigs in Barcelona and New York and lots of places for him, but never got a gig in London for like 3 or 4 years. DJing at Top Shop was about it.
Okay. So I mean, your skills were honed in front of a lot of very different audiences then.
Yeah. We were like regularly playing a lot of very different sets, which was really fun because we had to kind of get used to playing, you know, complete different sets. And
yeah. I mean, it was, to be honest, we were playing so eclectic then. It was kind of almost trying to recreate Optima with even more extreme taste.
Yeah, I was about to say, like, Optima was such a good inspiration because we saw it
we're like anything can go
flawlessly done there, and I think that was definitely an early inspiration.
It was someone was asking about whether you feel pressured to do a particular sort of thing now. I mean, having started with that very, very eclectic background and taste in music, was there a point where you kind of A, felt you were naturally slipping into your own sound, and B, found that was expected of you?
I think there was a realization that like we can't keep trying to like recreate sounds, and we realized that even if we can't do it perfectly or recreate it perfectly, then we realized that that's what makes our own sound. And once you kind of settle into that, you realize that you can just keep doing anything, and you don't have to it doesn't have to be exactly like what you envisage to be like.
Yeah,
it's always when you strive for perfection, it's like you're always comparing that to someone else's perfection, and it's someone else's probably spent years crafting that and also done stuff in a very different way than you can't exactly recreate. So we're just not having that pressure, and just that's when we kind of knew just whatever we can do goes, really.
Yeah, I mean, like we have tracks that we're not happy with. We have favorites. We have ones that we're not like. There's
got tracks that sound like our old tracks, you know. Yeah. Like we've got stuff that it is too close to like trance, or too close to like breaks tracks, or too close to like quartet tracks, you know what I mean? Everyone has it. It's like you make tracks, you use different synths, and they might sound very similar to other people, but we always kind of strive to kind of push it to the next stage. Can we develop this in our own way?
Yeah.
And it's just one of those things. It's like, I think it's just natural with production and experimenting as well.
So it's maybe less a matter of knowing your own sound than knowing your lane a bit. Like,
yeah, I think it's easy to kind of say your own sound when we select from 150, because we kind of see that as like songs that kind of align and work. I mean, it's like even with this album, it's definitely like a progression from the first album, in a sense that we knew that we had to keep it in the same vein or come from a similar place, but at the same time as we wanted it to sound new, so there's definitely going to be some sort of link.
And we make a lot of music that doesn't sound like us, if you know what I mean. Like, we have days where we'll just make hard techno in the studio, and we do days with ambient, and we just experiment, and also to cleanse a bit. Like, we definitely have days of just sort of not, and even sometimes we think they're good demos, and then we let a few people hear them, and we're like, yeah, nah, it's not. So I mean, it's definitely a thing of just sort of over time you kind of maybe whittle it down a bit. But I mean, I feel I
think it's like definitely a thing for us as well. We kind of try and keep the ideas fresh, never try and dwell on tracks, never force them to make them work. I think that's where you run into problems, I think.
mean, the same question basically, but for DJing. I mean, was there a point where you were like, okay, we've been booked to be Bicep rather than to play whatever we like? Was there a point where you kind of felt expectations on you as DJs?
I think post Printworks show online, I think we definitely had a bit of people who turned up to see our shows expected what we played at Printworks.
Yeah.
And the difference between a live show and a DJ show became blurred almost.
I think we also love, like we come from a background of a lot of hard techno, and we love that. And we'd been touring live for like 2 years, and we did some DJ shows, and we were on at like 4 a.m, and it just seemed really logical at 4 a.m. we'd like to hear like really slamming, banging techno, and then we'd play it, and then we'd be all like leaving the club on the way home, and they'd just be like hate on Twitter, like they're shy, nothing, like Printworks is way better, and we're like so there's definitely a kind of, there's an expectation of kind of maybe our sound. And I think it's also the glue paradox. We can't, like, if we don't play glue, we'll get hit for it takes a wee bit of time. I mean, we definitely, for sure we're going to do other projects in our lives. Bicep won't be the only project we ever do, and I think we always kind of, it's good to know at the back of your mind that you can always have other outlets, you know, like that's we do make other types of music sometimes, just we don't release it, but it kind of gives us a chance to, and we collect a lot of music that we wouldn't DJ. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Gordon in the chat is asking, do you release music under aliases? Are there any secret?
We released BDB on our label, and I don't think anyone got it, and it was Benjamin Damage and 2 people on the label, which is Benjamin Damage, Bicep, BDB. And we played it in our Printworks show, but yet I don't think anybody got it. But yeah, those 2 hard techno tracks last year with Benjamin Damage were us.
On that, people expecting you to play that one track thing, I interviewed Over Mono recently, and Tesla, you know, incredible producers, and you know, when he made Hackney Parrot and it was played in every single scene and every single type of DJ was playing it, he said he had to learn to play it last because people were turning up literally to hear him play that track. Hear him play it and they bugger off.
Yeah, I know, it's funny. They're good lads. They've been down to the studio once a while ago, and they're great. Like, we absolutely love their work.
Yes, it's like that's why we kind of play glue last as well. It's like chucking it in the middle of the set. I don't know if we get away with it.
People are asking, there's a glue edit that you played in the live stream. Will that ever see the light of day? Is that going to get released?
Yeah, maybe. But the thing is, for us, we like the whole point of the live versions. A is to give people something different when they come to see us live, and secondly, if we're going to be playing something out for a couple of years, we want to feel like it's fresh in our heads and something we can develop. So once we've toured it for quite a while,
once we get bored of it, we'll probably...
But like, it's really for us, it's like important to kind of have stuff that's a bit you know, fresh. I feel like once the version's released, it's kind of like
Glue's also a hard one because it's quite hard to deviate too hard from the original and keep everyone happy. So we're in the process of even developing that live version to kind of be super happy with it and also make it feel fresh rather than just, you know, like it's definitely, we're slowly piecing together. Even after playing it for a couple of years, we still need to kind of refine it in a way.
What is your live setup like? I mean, you know, quite a few people have been asking, and you know, obviously you're surrounded by old synths where you're sitting now. You can't take all those on stage.
SH101 each, like a big mono synth each, which is great.
We basically try and recreate the studio in the way it runs
in this most simple form.
Yeah, mixing desk,
loads of guitar pedals.
Yeah,
drum machine each,
like compressors, EQs, everything kind of recorded in wet.
Yeah,
but also we kind of want to have the bit, like the main thing of the shows is being able to really rag the machines. We know them inside out and we want to push them to the limits without feeling like you just need to keep this for this song tight. We want to be able to make it sound good everywhere. So the compressors in hard, desks is a little bit hot, you know, like we try and keep everything running as if like a band would and gel it together through the mix of the desk. And it makes it way more fun. It means that we do like live drumming over the top, but it doesn't feel like it's mixed badly. And to be honest, it's taken so long to kind of even get to that point where we're happy. Like we have live side chains coming into from the SH101 stuff for certain tracks, and that
was the scariest thing, was because when we first started touring live, it was just a load of parts coming out of Ableton, and then some dubbing, some drums over the top, and it was very basic. And then the big change was when we kind of had the guts to do live bass and live top lines. So it was like the bass was completely, you had to get your EQ right, your compression, your side chain, that all had to come, you know, from loaded guitar pedals. And once we kind of got that we just been able to build on top.
And we've also made the coffins. They are like a big they're essentially big like guitar pedal cases. They're fixed, and we've said we're going to restrict ourselves to what's within them. And even like on my side, I've got Eventide pedals, and we've got it to the point now where Matt can press spacebar and load a full tune, and every single thing from the presets to the BPM of the guitar pedals changes for every song. So it's like, you know, like everything is on a spacebar. There's about 10 different movements. The visuals sync. There's like information's going to like 10 different bits at once. So it's refined and complex, but like not too much that you can't just like play it live and feel like if you touch one thing, it's going to break.
I was going to say, you know, that must be some bespoke setup, because so many people from previous generations have gone the opposite direction from you, because analog gear and pedals and stuff is so unstable.
It just doesn't sound. There's nothing better than
the weak link of the setup is the computer.
Yeah, the computer's the only bad part, but it took us, because we still play, like for example, the pads on Glue are like it's like four synths that make those pads together. There's no way we're gonna have that live. So obviously we have some recordings like the Glue pads, you know, Opal's main melody, that was done on a very specific synth. So it's like there's certain things that you don't recreate live. What we do is like things like the monos, the top lines, like the melodies, and the bass is live, and then we have characteristic parts that are like recordings that we feed in. But the only part that's ever in any trouble is anything to do with the computers. Like, I mean, if it's just
like, we've had every issue possible with the computers, and even Mac. Like, you speak to obviously the geniuses, but like we've got friends who work in San Francisco for Mac, and they don't know what the issues are. So.
I think it's like old. It's 2012, 2015 was when Macs were good. They've got bad since.
Yeah, it's like when they break on stage, it's like there's no feeling like it.
We had a first year of touring live. I mean, it was every week something went wrong, but we had a real big issue with we had a Mac at stage, and it was just the information it was sending was just cutting out. And we remember Glue, the pads just disappeared. Everything else in the track stayed, and we had all the drum machines going, and the pads just disappeared, and we just had to fizzle the track out and start a new one. And it was just like, oh god.
And also, it was like on the screen, it was saying it was playing, so there's green lights everywhere, but there's no sound. And it's just, these kind of issues are more frustrating, and they're not tangible at all. Yeah.
That's a trial by fire. I mean, you know, that is definitely character forming, right?
Oh, here, like Yeah, there was a stage where I was like, there isn't actually anything else that can go wrong. We had a lot of hiccups the first year.
But like I see even the question switch the circle on. It's like we've looked at all these different analog options, but yet at the same time as you can't do stuff like you can't change time signatures, you can't send MIDI information to like for pedals and changing presets and things like that. It's like
Ableton's great for that, especially again like sending information to the Eventide pedals and little bits like that. Also, you know, like an example is the BDB stuff, that techno track of Benjamin Damage. We only recorded parts in the studio, and we never got around to making the track as a track. It was just a jam recorded into a load of loops, and we just bounced the loops and then on stage with a USB plugged it in, knocked some of the loops into the laptop, and then drummed in some MIDI and performed it for 2 months before we had ever laid it out. So we actually made the track like actually live, and that's something that we just did, not thinking about it on stage. Like before a show in Dublin, we're like, right, let's bang all this info in, let's try this track at the end of the set, and then it was like, oh shit, let's finish this.
Watching videos of it performed and trying to recreate it in the studio, the layout.
You mean that would be a real process of a few days to do with a circle or something, whereas Ableton, you know, that was done in soundcheck, you know, bang it in. And I think
it's also very visual as well.
Ableton's a lot of freedom to move very quickly, so it gives you a lot of creativity.
Yeah, I mean, there was a sense. There was, you know, a lot of old heads, I think, had the idea that when Ableton Live came in, it squared things off and it made things a bit predictable, and it wasn't the same as analog. But you know, clearly, you keep it lively.
We only send like we originally were sending CV and gate to the mono, since we've now got the MIDI converted, but we just send out clips of MIDI to all the machines. So we make them, you know, we perform them live, but we have, you know, the notes pre-recorded, and that just gives you, it's just a really easy way of kind of using the best of both worlds. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think it's like we took an 808 on tour with us for 2 years, and by the end it was like a granny. It didn't want to turn up when it was 4 o'clock in the morning, sweaty in the club. It wouldn't turn on.
Yeah,
and then you take it back to the hotel room when it's ready to go to bed. It was fine.
I think it's Paranoid London. I think so. Don't quote me on this. I think it was the Paranoid London guys. Something happened when we were playing together in Stockholm, or I think it was Stockholm. And all the presets on their was it Paranoid? Yeah, all they're 303. So with a 303 or an 808, you store the presets inside, and it requires an internal battery on top of being powered. The internal battery stores the presets. Battery went, lost everything before the show, and that's it. You're finished. Having to sit in a hotel with a manual of notes written out, trying to plug them in, like that's why something, you know, like 808, we just have all our MIDI stored on a Dropbox folder, and if our computer dies, we just get a new computer quickly. And you know, I think it's important to kind of use the best of the modern world with the old world. You know,
I remember reading actually in Peter Hook's book that he talks about having to program the DMX drum machine for New Order shows, and because nobody else in the band knew how to do it, and the engineer wasn't there, and it'd take him like 3 days, and then some days that would wipe, and you'd be like, you know what I mean? It's those things that people look back nostalgically at, like how easy it was then, but it was not easy.
Yeah.
I can remember going to, you know, early 90s shows, and you know, I was talking to Mixmaster Morris about this recently, because he's been digging out some of his old live stuff, and the seeing people clearly off their tits, pulling their hair out as they swap discs in and out of that and like try and like put a hairdryer to the analog synth to get it to stop it going out of tune and stuff. You know, it's a miracle any live show's ever happened.
Yeah, tunes actually. We had we moved it to SH101s, but we used to have an SH09. Was it 09? Yeah, SH09, which is like this. It's the 70s, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a discrete circuitry, so it doesn't have any chips really in it. It has a couple, but it's very much like as analog as you
very early like synth, and Andy used to use that for the top lines for like Justin stuff, and it. Honestly, depending on the temperature of the country you're playing, you had like the tuning would just go, whoa. Like seeing hot climates, it would jump up 3 semitones, and we'd have to send out a C to get an A. Like it was ridiculous how temperamental it was. But
that's also a plus for Ableton. You can do that in soundcheck.
Yeah,
you just pitching all the MIDI in one go for the whole show.
we are filling up our time fast. Before we get fully into sound on sound territory,
sorry.
Can I ask you about how you have kind of witnessed the music scene globally? Because you said you were playing internationally from before you were playing in the UK almost, and so you've seen things develop and you've seen attitudes to techno and the rise of the B word, the business techno.
Yeah.
And things are so different now. EDM has kind of like almost, we hope, peaked, and then
I mean, it's kind of one of those things. I think everything, it's things have probably always been polarized and split, but like for sure, it seems that everything nowadays, everything's kind of split in two. And definitely, even through how people within the industry have reacted to the pandemic, the play graves, some people are in it for the ego and the money, and other people are in it for the art. The people who've been able to kind of pull themselves away and just go and burrow away and work on it have done so. And there's others who have felt the need to stay in the limelight at whatever cost. And I think it's definitely, without a doubt, it feels very split. It's hard to really, we can really only comment on the time we've really spent in the industry. We couldn't really comment before. When we were younger, even or first started touring, we were playing very small shows. It's very hard to have a grasp of, the bigger picture.
Yeah.
But for sure, it feels like the industry's kind of split in half.
I think like the common thing is like there's always like clubs and countries that you wouldn't expect, and people are in it for the love, and these are the ones I'm fearing for the most, the little small ones that really like would take us across to like Zurich or Paris and we'd basically sleep on someone's floor and then come back. It's like these kind of gigs are what were quintessential to us growing as artists and also as DJs. It was like these were the most fun times when the money wasn't really in it, and I fear now with all the kind of restrictions and stuff, we're going to lose that whole bottom line basically.
My greatest fear is with the visa restrictions now imposed in the UK and the EU, that yes, people who chase the money or who have the money will be able to survive, but it's those who don't, or making people have to think about money first and not think about the art is going to dramatically, I think, could dramatically change things, especially in the UK, obviously, because that's where the restrictions are, and I think it's very worrying as to how things could change in the future.
It's because we have to like consider these things even when we tour America, and we've had to do it for years, like paying for a visa, and the cost of that alone for America was always a massive issue in terms of how many gigs you need to do to kind of break even, to even like survive over there for the weeks. Like there was one time we had to do 28 gigs in 21 days, I think, in like during South by Southwest and that kind of era, in like I remember a March time tour, and we came back and had made like £300 or something. And it's just like sometimes it's like these kind of things, if people want to use it or have it as a career, it's like I don't think you could do these sort of things as on a whim like that again.
No, totally. I guess the flip side is, and what we have to really, really hope for is that the passion that has been kind of condensed and held back and put into things like communities around live streams and fan communities and all of that, and people who are like absolutely gagging to get back out there will be released and be channeled towards rebuilding that infrastructure on a grassroots level.
And that's the kind of scorched earth thing of like, we were in a very tough period now, double whammy of the pandemic and Brexit, certainly in the UK. And you just hope that there's that like things are condensed, and hopefully there's a renewed underground.
Well, without wanting to be cheesy, you guys have made the perfect album to soundtrack getting back out there. It is honestly, it works for home listening, and I've laid in the dark listening to it, and it's taken me back to chill out rooms of the past, and dreaming of flying through the sky and whatever. But I cannot imagine the scenes that these tracks are going to provoke. It's big. It's a big record, and it is full of that like very genuine you know, not cynical in the way of commercial trance records, but that very genuine kind of high flying euphoria. So I think it should drive some people to get those parties going again.
Okay. Thank you so much.